So after my video I did on the herringbone stitch, I had people asking for a pattern for a crocheted pumpkin. So today I'm going to show you how to make your very own crocheted pumpkin, and we're going to use a different stitch, but you can still use this with any stitch that you want. So the herringbone stitch, if you really like that, will apply to this pattern for a crocheted pumpkin. So let's dig right in. Welcome back to Solo Stitching. I'm Lavina Perry. Let's stitch. So for this project, I am using a number 6 super bulky yarn. It is a Lions brand, Hometown, and it is a 5-ounce skein with 81 yards. I'm not sure if this one is going to be enough, so I might have to break into a second skein, but I'll let you know as we go along. And then for the hook, I am using a size K 6.5 millimeter hook, and we are going to be starting with a magic circle. So to make a magic circle, if you don't know how, you're going to put the little tail in front, wrap it around. And I know there's multiple ways to do this. This is the way that I use, and it seems to work pretty well for me. So once you have the top crossed over, I just hold it with my pinky, and then I insert my hook between 2 fingers and just grab the yarn and bring it through. And then we're going to do a chain stitch to secure it. So once we have our circle, I'm going to go ahead and do 12 single crochets into the circle. And I did a whole tutorial on creating a magic circle, so you can click the link up here. I'll put a link for you if you want a more in-depth tutorial on magic circles, how to make them. Okay, so there is my 12 single crochets inside of my magic circle. So now I'm going to tighten this off, but I'm going to leave a bit of a hole in the middle because we're going to need a hole in the top of our pumpkin. So we want that hole to be big enough for the cinnamon stick stem that we're going to put on here. It looks like I got this a little too tight. I'm just going to pull that out a little. Join this into the first stitch. So if you're looking at your magic circle, so this is our chain stitch right here, and this is the first stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook into that and go ahead and join that. And I'm just going to spread these stitches out to fill in the rest of the string, since we're leaving a pretty sizable hole in the middle for the cinnamon stick. So you can see it's about a finger sized hole that I'm leaving. Then we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work around doing 2 single crochets in each stitch all the way around, starting in this same stitch where I just joined. Okay, so we're almost done doing our second row with 2 single crochets in each stitch. These will be tight. You're using very chunky yarn, putting it into a very small space. So it's supposed to be tight. The stitches are supposed to be close together. So don't worry if you feel like, oh, this is really hard to get the hook in and out, or it just feels very tight. That's how it's supposed to be. So now we've done our last 2 single crochets in that last stitch, and we are going to join this with a slip stitch so that the circle is finished, and that's what it looks like. So the next step is we are going to do chain stitches, and we are going to do 25 chain stitches. Okay, there is my 25 chain stitches off the side of my magic circle that I made here. That's what that's going to look like. So now I'm going to start working the rows back and forth, and we're going to be attaching them to the circle as we go. So it's going to build the walls of our pumpkin like this. So it's going to build it around the circle. So we're going to start by doing a single crochet in the second stitch from the hook. So 1, 2, we're going to put a single crochet, and then I'm going to half double crochet in each stitch to the second to last stitch. And I'm just working into the tops of the stitches, the chain stitches. Typically, if this was going to be my finished edge, I would be working into the back loop of the chain so that I had a nice finished edge. But since this is going to get sewn into the pumpkin and you're not going to see it, I'm just working into the top stitch of these chain stitches just to make it a little easier on myself. But you can work them however you would like. Okay, so we are down to our last stitches here, our last half double crochets, the last one, and now I'm to the last chain stitch right here, and I'm going to do a single crochet. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the same stitch that I started in. And like I said, this is very tight. It's supposed to be. So I'm going to work into that same stitch, and I'm doing a slip stitch so that it's attached on there. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch over. So there's my slip stitch. So I'm going to move over to this next stitch. I'm going to do a slip stitch. I'm going to chain 1. And that's what it looks like. And now I'm going to turn, and I'm going to start working back up the side of the pumpkin. And we are going to be using a third loop half double crochet to create the stripes, or like the lines going up and down the sides of the pumpkin. So we're not going to work into this slip stitch that we created. It's going to be tempting to work into this stitch right here. That's not a stitch, that's your slip stitch. We want to work into the half double, or into the single crochet. So we're going to do a single crochet. Each row is going to start and end with a single crochet. And then we're going to do our third loop half double crochets. So you can see the top of the stitch here, the little V, and then you can see there is the bottom of the stitch. So if you look at the single crochet, you have this bottom loop of the stitch. You can see that same loop right here, but for the half double crochet we have this extra loop, and that is the loop that we are going to be crocheting into. That is called the third loop, and it's unique to the half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to insert my hook into that third loop, pull up a loop, and finish the half double crochet. And I'm going to do that in each stitch across. So I don't want to be going into this stitch right here, or to this loop right here. Okay, that's the bottom of the half double crochet. I want to be working into this longer loop right here, which is the third loop, right below the top of the stitch. We're at the end of our row of half double crochets. This is what it looks like on this side. And we are to the last stitch, which was our single crochet. And you can see it's kind of difficult to see it because it's shorter than the stitch next to it. But if you turn your work over, you can see there's the V of your single or your chain stitch from when you turned. So that's your turning chain. And we're going to work into that turning chain, and we're going to do a single crochet into the turning chain. And then we're going to chain one. And we're going to turn our work. So now that we've got one row done, you can see that we've created like this ridge or this stripe that is going to be the side of our pumpkin. Okay, so we're going to work back down, and I'm going to show you how to attach it to the circle, and then we're going to do this. We're going to repeat this all the way around the circle that we created. So again, we're going to be starting with a single crochet into that first stitch, and then we're working our third loop half double crochets, working into this third loop of our stitch. So we're not working through the top, we're not working there, we're working into this third loop. Okay, so I'm finished with my half double crochets. I'm to the last stitch where we're going to put our single crochet. And again, like, don't be confused about this stitch. So we're not working down here, we're working into this stitch right here, and it's very tight, but you can see if you turn it over again, there's the two sides of our V. That's our single crochet that we started with. So we're going to insert our hook into that stitch right there and finish our single crochet. That's what the whole row looks like. And then we're going to slip stitch into the same stitch that we started. So you can see the stitch where we are working out of right here, where you can see the slip stitch coming up right there. We're going to slip stitch back into that same stitch. And then we're going to work a slip stitch into the next stitch. So this is where we are. We're going to move over to this next stitch, do our slip stitch, and chain one. And then we're going to turn, and we're going to repeat that process, going up and back, attaching it to the circle all the way around till we get back to the beginning. So go ahead and work your rows, and then I will meet you back here with the body of our pumpkin all ready to go. As we're making some progress around the circle here that we created, working into these stitches as we start to build the walls for our pumpkin, I just wanted to give you a little view of what it should be looking like. So you're creating a nice curve here. Your slip stitches, as you're connecting it, are going to build what looks like another round on your circle. That is what it should look like. You can see that in there. This right here. So I'm going to keep working around and working into these stitches as I continue to build up the walls for the sides of my pumpkin. All right, now we have all of the walls of our pumpkin built. You can see where I had to switch skeins of yarn, so you will need 2 of those Lion brand things of yarn that are 81 yards. So I would say I've probably used a good 120 yards at this point. So if you want to get a bigger skein of yarn, you can go ahead and grab that, but make sure that you have about 120 yards of this size 6 super chunky synthetic yarn that we're using for the pumpkin. So I am to my last row. So as you can see on the bottom, I've worked all the way around and I'm back to my starting chain where I started the walls of the pumpkin. So we're going to end by going up to the open end of the pumpkin. So after you slip stitch into that last chain, as you can see that I've done here, and then we're going to chain 1 and we're going to work that last row. So there's my chain 1, and I'm going to turn and I'm going to work into the single crochet, making sure I'm not working into the slip stitch, and then I'm going to start my 3rd loop half double crochets all the way to the end for the last row of the walls of the pumpkin. And my last half double crochet, and then my last single crochet right here in the chain stitch. And I am going to pull out a good yard of yarn. I'm going to leave a very long tail on this. Let's give that a little clip. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this through and tighten that down. So now the walls are finished. You can see the inside of the pumpkin. There's our little tail that we used to tighten down the magic circle. And now we're going to attach these 2 walls on the side of the pumpkin to finish it off so that we can move on to the next step. To do this, I'm going to use a yarn needle that has the big eye of the needle, and it doesn't have a very pointy end. It's more blunt. It's just meant for weaving your yarn through. You can get one of these yarn needles. They are the best. I have others like this one, but you can see how pokey it is. It's very sharp and the eye isn't as big. And I used to think this was a yarn needle until I actually found yarn needles, and these are so nice to work with because you don't have to worry about stabbing your finger. And they're much easier to get the yarn through. Okay, so to attach these sides, I'm just gonna go through my very first chain that I made. I'm gonna pull this through, and it doesn't have to be super tight because I'm gonna use the mattress stitch to attach these 2 ends of my crocheting. And if you would like a tutorial on how to do the mattress stitch, I worked it on another pumpkin, so you can get the link for that right up here. I'll have the link for you. So now that I'm through this side, I'm going to come back to my original side, and how I like to work the mattress stitch, rather than going through the 2 sides like this, which ends up leaving a ridge. Okay, so, and you can do it this way if you want. If it works well into your other striping and it looks natural, feel free to work your mattress stitch back and forth this way. instead of into the tops of the stitches, which is what I'm going to show you because I want mine to be flush like this. How that looks when you're doing it is you're going to work into the top of the stitch and then up through the top of the next stitch, and you're going to pull. And then we're going to go to the other side. Now remember, when we started, I worked into the top of my stitches instead of through the back loop, so I don't have this really nice finished edge on this side. It's not going to be I'm not going to be working into two really nice finished edges. This edge is going to be more pointed, and it still works perfectly fine. So I'm just going to go in through one and out through the other like that. And we're going to pull. And notice that I'm not worrying about fastening these down right away. The lovely thing about the mattress stitch is that it all tightens down perfectly, but you don't have to do it as you go along. And I'm just working one stitch to the next, in through the top of one, up through the top of the next. Alright, so that is what it looks like, all stitched together. See, it's very, it just fits really flushly when you do it that way, which is nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed my yarn through. So I'm not going to go through this middle hole. I'm just going to stick it through that first row, and I'm going to pull the yarn out the opening here. So now when you look inside of the pumpkin, you can see the yarn coming up through there. So we're going to set this aside for now, and it's time to stuff our pumpkin. So I'm just using a regular polyfill stuffing. It doesn't have to be anything special. And I'm just going to grab handfuls, and I'm just going to stuff it down in there. So as you can see, like it looks full. I have it kind of pressed down in there. It's not, I don't even know the best way to describe it, but once we get the pumpkin all cinched up and we get it depressed down, it will be firm. So it should be not like packed in there to where it's overflowing, but it should be, when you have it like pressed down in there, the pumpkin should still look like it's full of the polyfill stuffing. So now with our yarn hanging out here, we're going to stitch around the edge, and we're going to cinch it shut. So what that looks like, because I've come up from the bottom here, so I have the yarn is kind of on the side. I don't have it coming up through the middle. It should come up through the side, and I'm going to go through one stitch there, and then I'm gonna count. It's because this is the side, it's not going to be like, oh, I can just easily count 3 stitches. So I'm just going to kind of imagine about the same distance around, and I'm just going to weave the yarn in and out. So maybe like skip one section, come out through the next, skip one section, go in through the next. So it's going to leave, you can see, you're going to be able to see like little strings of yarn going across, but they should be fairly evenly spaced. And if you get a little stuffing come out, that's okay. We're gonna just do this all the way around the edge until we get back to our starting place. So here we are, back where we started. And now we're going to pull on the yarn. And I'm just gonna leave my needle on here because I'm not done with it yet. So I'm going to cinch this pumpkin closed. I'm just gonna keep just making sure that it's laying down nicely and pulling until I get to where it's just a minimal hole in there. And if you need to adjust, that's okay. And then I'm going to take my yarn here. And I've really got that cinched down, so it's just maybe a fingertip sized hole. And I'm gonna want to hold that in place. I'm just gonna find some loops here to stitch through to where I can pull this down to where it will stay. I'm gonna give this a good pull, hold it, and then weave the yarn through with a little bit of a little knot there. So this isn't the final stitching we're doing, but we do want that to stay shut as much as possible. I'm just gonna make sure that these ends are up as much as they can. All right, so if you want to finish closing the hole, if you're kind of like me where you don't really like to have that hole in it, you can just work in some of these loops around and continue to pull that hole down. And if you want to leave a little bit of a hole, that's totally fine as well. It's really just a personal preference. So see, I'm like closing off this hole here. Okay. So now our next step is we want to make this look like a pumpkin where the top is depressed and so is the bottom. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to feed the needle back up through this hole. Now you can see your needle is much shorter than this pumpkin. So you're going to have to press on the top, press on the bottom as you're pushing the needle through. And where it's going to come up is going to be in these stitches around this center hole. So I want to feed the needle through. And it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get it to where I want it. There is the needle coming up right there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that and I'm going to pull it through and I'm going to cinch that down. And then I'm going to move to the next hole and I'm going to weave it back through. And we're going to keep doing this back and through, back and forth. And when I bring it up, I try to just bring it up through the center of the bottom if I can. There we go. So you can see the needle coming up there, and I'm pushing on this other side to depress the pumpkin down. And I'm going to pull that up, and then I'm going to go in through just barely on the side here just to catch that side because we're putting a lot of pressure on that stitching. So we want to make sure that you catch a good loop, and then I'm going to bring it up through the next hole so you can see that needle coming up there. I'm going to grab that, pull it tight. As you can see, we're creating that rounded pumpkin look. And then I'm going to go down through the next hole and back out the center of the pumpkin. Right up through the center. Like I say, you might need a work with it a little to get that needle where you want it to go. And then I'm going to go to another right off the side, and I'm going to kind of work around the bottom the same as I'm working around this top. And I'm just going to keep working through each hole all the way around, kind of maneuvering my needle till I get it up where I want it. There we go. And again, this is where that yarn needle that's not super sharp will come in very handy, so that you're not poking yourself with the needle as it comes back and forth through the holes. Alright, so I'm to the last one. You can see I've worked all the way around this circle and really made like a nice indentation for the top of the pumpkin.